He thought he had fired me. The fluorescent lights in Marcus Blackwell's corner office cast harsh shadows across his weathered face as he leaned back in his leather chair, fingers steepled like a cartoon villain. I stood there in my rumpled khakis and coffee-stained shirt, laptop bag slung over my shoulder, trying to process what he'd just said. "You're done here, David. Clean out your desk." 5 years. 5 years of 60-hour weeks. Missed dinners with my wife, Sarah. Canceled weekend plans with my kids. 5 years of building Blackwell Industries' entire digital infrastructure from the ground up, transforming an antiquated manufacturing company into a modern operation that could compete in the 21st century. And this was how it ended, not with gratitude, not even with a proper explanation, but with Marcus's trademark sneer and a dismissive wave of his manicured hand. "Marcus, I don't understand. The Q3 numbers are up 18% because of the automation systems I implemented. The new client portal has reduced customer complaints by—" I said, "You're done." His voice carried that cold authority that had intimidated countless employees over his 20-year reign as CEO. "Security will escort you out. Your final paycheck will be mailed." The walk to my desk felt like a death march. Every step echoed off the polished concrete floors of our converted warehouse office space. My colleagues, people I'd worked alongside for years, grabbing lunch, celebrating project completions, commiserating over impossible deadlines, suddenly found their computer screens fascinating. Only Jenny from accounting met my eyes, offering a sympathetic grimace before quickly looking away. My desk was a monument to my dedication. 3 monitors displaying code I'd been debugging since 5 a.m., a half-eaten turkey sandwich from the corner deli, family photos taped to my monitor bezels, and a coffee mug that read, "World's Okayest Programmer," a gag gift from Sarah that had somehow become my favorite. As I swept my personal items into a cardboard box, my hands shook with a mixture of rage and humiliation. The security guard, a decent guy named Tony, who I'd helped set up his home Wi-Fi last Christmas, stood awkwardly nearby. "Sorry about this, Dave," he muttered. "Orders are orders." "I know, Tony. Not your fault." But it was someone's fault. As I walked toward the exit, box in hand, I caught sight of Derek Hoffman lurking near the conference room, trying to look busy while obviously watching my departure. Derek, the nephew Marcus had hired 6 months ago, fresh out of college with a business degree and 0 technical experience. Derek, who'd been asking increasingly pointed questions about my projects or my processes, my relationships with vendors. Derek, who had Marcus's ear and apparently my job. The late October air bit through my thin dress shirt as I stood in the parking lot, keys dangling from my trembling fingers. The industrial district around our office looked particularly bleak under the overcast sky. Chain-link fences, loading docks, the distant rumble of highway traffic. I sat in my 10-year-old Honda Civic for 15 minutes, engine running, heat blasting, trying to figure out how I was going to tell Sarah. Our 2-story colonial in Riverside Heights had been a stretch when we bought it 5 years ago, but my salary at Blackwell had made it possible. Now, staring at the cheerful yellow siding and the Halloween decorations Emma and Jake had insisted on putting up last weekend, the house felt like a financial millstone around my neck. Sarah was in the kitchen, still in her scrubs from her shift at the pediatric clinic. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and she was stirring something that smelled like heaven, probably her famous beef stew. For a moment, I just watched her through the window, memorizing this last instant before everything changed. "You're home early," she said without turning around when I walked in. "Good day." I set the cardboard box on the kitchen counter with more force than necessary. Sarah turned, took one look at my face, and immediately turned off the burner. "Oh, honey, what happened?" The whole story came out in a jumbled rush. Marcus's cold dismissal, Derek's smug satisfaction, the humiliating escort to my car. Sarah listened without interruption, her expression shifting from concern to anger to determination. "That bastard," she finally said, and I was surprised by the venom in her voice. Sarah rarely swore. "After everything you've done for that company." "It doesn't matter now. I need to start looking for something else immediately. The mortgage payment is due in 2 weeks. She wrapped her arms around me, and I let myself sink into her warmth. "We'll figure it out. We always do." But figuring it out proved harder than either of us expected. The tech job market in our mid-sized city wasn't exactly booming, especially for someone with my specialized skill set. I'd spent so many years building custom solutions for Blackwell's unique manufacturing processes that my experience didn't translate cleanly to other industries. Interview after interview yielded the same result, promising conversations followed by form letter rejections. "We've decided to go with someone whose background is a better fit. While your qualifications are impressive, we've selected another candidate. We'll keep your resume on file for future opportunities." 3 months in, our savings account was hemorrhaging money. I'd taken on freelance projects, building websites for local businesses, fixing computers for friends of friends, but nothing that paid enough to cover our expenses. Sarah picked up extra shifts at the clinic, but even her increased hours couldn't bridge the gap. The worst part wasn't the financial stress, though. That kept me awake most nights. It was the slow erosion of my confidence. I'd gone from being an indispensable expert to just another unemployed programmer in his 40s. Every rejection felt personal. Every day without progress felt like proof that Marcus had been right to get rid of me. Then in January, I got a call from Lisa Chen. "David, this is Lisa from Meridian Venture Capital. I hope you remember me. We met at the Tech Innovation Summit 2 years ago." I did remember her, vaguely, a sharp woman in her 30s who'd given a presentation about identifying emerging technologies. We'd chatted briefly at the networking reception, but I couldn't imagine why she'd be calling me now. "I've been following your career, and I heard about your departure from Blackwell Industries. I'm sorry that didn't work out, but I think it might be the best thing that ever happened to you." Lisa explained that Meridian was looking to acquire small to medium manufacturing companies and modernize their operations. They needed someone with deep technical expertise who understood both the legacy systems these companies were running and the modern solutions needed to bring them into the digital age. "It would mean travel," she said. "Probably 2 weeks out of every month. Visiting potential acquisitions, assessing their infrastructure, developing implementation plans. But David, I'm talking about a significant equity stake in our manufacturing division. If this works out the way I think it will, you won't just have a job, you'll be building something." The base salary she quoted was 30% more than I'd made at Blackwell. The potential upside, if the equity paid off, was astronomical. Sarah found me staring at the phone for 10 minutes after the call ended. "Good news?" she asked hopefully. "I think so, but it's going to mean a lot of time away from home. David, look at me." She took my hands in hers. "We've been barely keeping our heads above water for months. Emma asked me yesterday why Daddy looks sad all the time. If this is a real opportunity, we'll make it work." The next 18 months were a blur of airports, hotel rooms, and industrial facilities. I evaluated everything from textile manufacturers in North Carolina to electronics assemblers in Ohio. Most were family businesses, 3rd or 4th generation operations that had been successful for decades, but were slowly losing ground to more agile competitors. My job was to assess not just their technology, though, that was crucial, but their entire operational ecosystem. Could their processes be automated? Were their customer relationships strong enough to survive a modernization transition? Did their leadership team have the vision to embrace change? For every company Meridian acquired, I became the de facto chief technology officer during the integration phase. It was exhausting, exhilarating, and incredibly lucrative. The equity stakes Lisa had promised proved even more valuable than projected, as our modernization efforts consistently exceeded revenue projections. By month 6, I had a dedicated team of developers working under me. By month 12, I was flying first class and staying in nice hotels. By month 18, Sarah and I were seriously discussing whether we wanted to upgrade to a bigger house. But the most satisfying projects weren't the biggest acquisitions. They were companies like Morrison Metalworks in Indiana, a 3-generation family business that made specialized components for the automotive industry. The owner, Bill Morrison, reminded me of my grandfather, gruff exterior hiding deep pride in his craft and genuine care for his 43 employees. "I know we need to change," he told me during my first site visit, gesturing at the mix of 1980s-era machines and handwritten inventory logs that somehow kept his operation running. "But I'll be damned if I let some corporate vultures come in here and destroy everything my father built." "That's not what we're here to do," I assured him. "We want to make you more competitive, not less human." The Morrison integration became my template for future acquisitions. We automated the repetitive, dangerous tasks while preserving the skilled craftsmanship that made the company special. We implemented digital inventory management without eliminating the floor supervisors who knew every bolt and bracket in the warehouse. We increased efficiency by 40% while maintaining the family culture that kept experienced employees loyal for decades. Bill Morrison sent me a handwritten thank you note 6 months after the integration was complete. "You kept your word," it said. "My boys are making more money, working safer, and we're getting orders from customers we never could have handled before." Those were the moments that made the travel worthwhile. The proof that what I was doing mattered beyond just the financial returns. I was in Detroit, finalizing the acquisition of a precision machining company, when Lisa called with news that would change everything. "David, we've got an opportunity that I think will interest you. Blackwell Industries is for sale." My hand tightened around my phone. What happened? "Financial difficulties, from what I understand. Their revenues have been declining for the past year. The nephew that Marcus hired, Derek something, apparently wasn't quite ready for the responsibilities they gave him. Several major clients pulled their contracts after system failures. I knew exactly what had happened. Derek had probably tried to cut costs by eliminating the redundancies and backup systems I'd built into Blackwell's infrastructure. The kind of shortcuts that look good on a quarterly budget report but leave you vulnerable to the kind of catastrophic failures that destroy client relationships overnight. Marcus is looking to sell to a larger competitor, but we could offer him more if we move quickly. The question is, do you want it? Did I want it? I'd spent 2 years building expertise in manufacturing acquisitions, but Blackwell would be different. It wouldn't just be another integration project. It would be personal. What kind of timeline are we looking at? If we can put together an offer this week, we could close within 60 days. But, David, this would be a big step up in responsibility. We're talking about a $40 million acquisition, 200 employees. I'd want you to take over as CEO once the integration is complete." CEO of the company that had fired me 2 years ago. The due diligence process felt surreal. I walked through the same converted warehouse space where I'd spent 5 years of my life. But now I was evaluating it as a potential buyer instead of just another employee. The familiar smell of industrial coffee and cleaning solvent hit me with unexpected nostalgia. Marcus met me in the lobby, and I had to admire his composure. If he was surprised to see his former employee leading the technical assessment for a major acquisition offer, he didn't show it. "David," he said with a firm handshake and his trademark politician smile, "I have to say I'm impressed. Lisa tells me you've become quite the expert in manufacturing integration." "It's been an interesting couple of years," I replied, matching his neutral tone. The tour was professionally cordial, but personally awkward. Marcus showed me through facilities I knew better than my own house, explaining processes I'd designed. When we reached the server room, the climate-controlled sanctuary where I'd spent countless late nights debugging code and implementing upgrades, he gestured grandly at the humming racks of equipment. "Our IT infrastructure is quite robust," he said. "We invested heavily in automation over the past few years." I nodded politely, not mentioning that I could see obvious signs of deferred maintenance and cost-cutting shortcuts. The backup systems were running on hardware that should have been replaced months ago. The network monitoring tools I'd implemented had clearly been abandoned in favor of cheaper alternatives. It was like seeing a house you'd built being allowed to fall apart. Derek appeared during the financial review meeting, and the moment he saw me, his confident presentation demeanor cracked slightly. He recovered quickly, but I caught the flash of recognition and concern in his eyes. "Derek has been instrumental in streamlining our operations," Marcus explained, seemingly oblivious to his nephew's discomfort. "He's identified numerous cost-saving opportunities. I bet he had the kind of cost-saving that looks good in the short term but undermines long-term stability. The kind that had probably led to whatever system failures cost them their major clients. That evening, I had dinner with my assessment team at a restaurant downtown. As we reviewed our findings, the picture became clearer. Blackwell was hemorrhaging money because their infrastructure was failing and they'd lost the expertise to fix it. The quick fixes and budget cuts had created a cascade of problems that would require significant investment to resolve. It's going to need a complete IT overhaul," my lead developer, Angela, observed as she scrolled through her notes. "Their systems are maybe 6 months away from a catastrophic failure." "How long to get everything back to stable operation?" I asked. "With the right team, maybe 8 months, but it won't be cheap." I smiled, remembering the meticulous documentation I'd maintained during my 5 years at Blackwell. Every system, every process, every potential failure point, all cataloged in files I'd saved to my personal cloud storage before my unceremonious departure. I don't think it'll take that long. 2 weeks later, Meridian's offer was accepted. Marcus had received a higher bid from Blackwell's main competitor, but their offer came with the assumption that they'd eliminate redundant positions and consolidate operations. Our offer preserved jobs and kept the company as an independent entity within Meridian's portfolio. The closing took place in a conference room at Marcus's lawyer's office downtown. As documents were signed and wire transfers authorized, I found myself studying Marcus across the polished mahogany table. He maintained his composure throughout the proceedings, but I could see the weight of defeat in the set of his shoulders. When the final signatures were complete, Lisa stood to make the announcement I'd been waiting 2 years to hear. "I'd like to introduce the new CEO of Blackwell Industries," she said. "David Chen will be taking over operations effective immediately." The color drained from Marcus's face. Derek, who had been fidgeting with his phone, looked up sharply and actually dropped the device. "David?" Marcus's voice was barely above a whisper. I stood, straightening my tie. "Thank you, Lisa. Marcus, Derek, I appreciate the professional way you've handled this transition. I look forward to working with the existing team to restore Blackwell to its full potential." The silence in the room was deafening. Marcus stared at me with a mixture of shock, confusion, and what might have been respect. Derek looked like he was about to be sick. I don't understand," Marcus finally managed. "You were just a programmer." "I was your chief technology officer," I corrected gently. "And for the past 2 years, I've been learning the business side of manufacturing. Turns out, when you combine technical expertise with strategic vision and the capital to execute, interesting things become possible." Marcus gathered his papers with shaking hands. "This is unexpected." "Change often is," I replied. "But I think you'll find that unexpected changes sometimes lead to the best outcomes." As the lawyers finalized the remaining paperwork, Derek approached me hesitantly. "David, look, I know how this probably looks, Derek, I interrupted, not unkindly. Right now, my priority is stabilizing operations and rebuilding client relationships. I'll need people who understand this company's history and capabilities. If you're willing to work hard and learn from your mistakes, there might be a place for you here. His relief was palpable. Yes, sir. Absolutely. Good. Your first assignment is to prepare a complete report on every system failure and client complaint from the past 18 months. I want to understand exactly what went wrong and why. Marcus overheard this exchange and approached as Derek hurried away. You're keeping him on? Marcus, I don't fire people for making mistakes. I fire them for not learning from mistakes or for creating toxic work environments. I let that hang in the air for a moment. Derek is young and inexperienced, but he's not malicious. With proper mentoring, he might become a valuable contributor. Marcus studied my face, perhaps looking for signs of the bitter, humiliated man he had dismissed 2 years earlier. Whatever he saw there seemed to surprise him. You've changed, he said finally. We all have. The question is whether we've learned from the experience. He extended his hand, and after a moment's hesitation, I shook it. Good luck, David. For what it's worth, I think I may have made a mistake. Water under the bridge, Marcus, but thank you. My first day as CEO began at 6 a.m. in the same parking lot where I'd sat in my Honda Civic trying to process my termination. This time, I was driving a leased BMW, not because I needed the status symbol, but because Sarah had insisted that the CEO of a manufacturing company should look the part. The building looked exactly the same from the outside, but everything felt different as I walked through the entrance. Jenny from accounting was the first to see me, and her face lit up with genuine pleasure. David! Oh my God, is it really true? You're our new boss? It's true, Jenny. How are things? Really? Her smile faded slightly. Honestly, it's been rough. We have lost some good people and morale has been pretty low. But if anyone can turn this around, it's you. The morning staff meeting was surreal. I stood in the same conference room where I'd presented countless project updates, looking at many of the same faces. But now they were looking to me for leadership, for vision, for hope. I know this transition has been unusual, I began, but I want to be clear about my intentions. This company has incredible potential. We have talented people, strong relationships with quality vendors, and manufacturing capabilities that our competitors would envy. What we've lacked recently is stability and strategic focus. I outlined my 90-day plan. Stabilize the IT infrastructure. Rebuild relationships with former clients. Implement new quality control processes and invest in the equipment and training needed to compete for larger contracts. I won't lie to you. The next few months will be challenging. We have problems to solve and relationships to rebuild. But I've seen what this company can accomplish when everything is working properly. I was here for 5 years, remember? I helped build the systems that made our best years possible. After the meeting, I spent the day walking through every department, talking to employees I'd known for years and getting updates on projects I'd helped initiate. The picture that emerged was exactly what I'd expected. A fundamentally sound operation that had been undermined by short-sighted cost-cutting and poor technical decisions. My first major decision was to reverse Derek's elimination of the redundant backup systems. The second was to bring back 2 senior technicians who had been laid off during the cost-cutting phase. The third was to personally call every client we'd lost in the past year and ask for the opportunity to discuss how we could rebuild their confidence in our capabilities. By the end of my first week, 3 former clients had agreed to give us trial orders. By the end of my first month, we had resolved the system stability issues that had been causing production delays. By the end of my 3rd month, we were profitable again. The transformation wasn't just financial. Walking through the facility, I could see the change in people's postures, hear it in their conversations. The fear and uncertainty that had permeated the workplace was being replaced by something that had been missing for too long: hope. 6 months after taking over, I was reviewing quarterly reports in my office. Marcus's former corner office, though I'd redecorated it completely when Angela knocked on my door. "David, you got a visitor. Says he doesn't have an appointment, but he'd like to speak with you if you have a few minutes." Marcus stood in my doorway, looking older and somehow smaller than I remembered. He was dressed casually khakis and a polo shirt instead of his usual expensive suit. "I hope you don't mind the intrusion," he said. "I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd see how things were going." "Of course. Come in, sit down. Can I get you coffee?" "That would be nice, thank you." We sat in the seating area I'd had installed comfortable chairs around a small table, much more conducive to conversation than the imposing desk setup Marcus had preferred. "I heard through the grapevine that you've landed the Morrison Industries contract," he said after a moment. "That's a significant win." "It is. Bill Morrison is a good man, and his company fits well with our capabilities." Marcus nodded, staring into his coffee cup. "I also heard you gave Derek a promotion. Production supervisor, is that right?" "He's earned it. Once he understood what was expected of him and got proper training, he turned out to be quite capable. Sometimes people just need the right environment to succeed." "That's generous of you considering." "Marcus, Derek was never the problem. He was young and inexperienced, put in a position he wasn't ready for. That's not malice, that's just poor management." I paused, choosing my words carefully. "We've all made mistakes in judgment." He met my eyes for the first time since arriving. "Is that what you think I did? Made a mistake in judgment?" "I think you made the decision you thought was best at the time, with the information you had available. The fact that it worked out differently than you expected doesn't make you a bad person." Marcus leaned back in his chair, and for a moment I saw not the imperious CEO who had fired me, but a tired man in his 60s who had built something significant and then watched it start to crumble. "You know, I used to think leadership was about making tough decisions and sticking to them no matter what. But sitting here now, seeing what you've accomplished." He shook his head. "Maybe real leadership is about admitting when you're wrong and learning from it." "Maybe it's about both," I said. "The courage to make difficult decisions when necessary, and the wisdom to recognize when those decisions need to be reconsidered." We sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching the activity on the production floor through my office windows. The third shift was just arriving, and I could see the easy camaraderie between workers that indicated good morale. "I owe you an apology," Marcus said suddenly. "The way I handled your termination was unprofessional and unfair. You deserve better, especially after everything you contributed to this company." "I appreciate that, Marcus. It means more than you know. Do you ever wonder how things might have been different if I'd handled it better? If I'd talked to you about my concerns instead of just ending it?" I considered the question seriously. Honestly, I think everything happened exactly the way it needed to. If you hadn't fired me, I never would have discovered what I was really capable of. I'd still be a very good programmer instead of learning to be a leader. Sarah and I wouldn't have grown closer through facing that challenge together. I wouldn't have the confidence and skills I have now. So you're saying getting fired was the best thing that ever happened to you? I laughed. Getting fired was terrible. It was humiliating and scary, and it nearly broke my family financially. But what came after? Yeah, that's been pretty amazing. Marcus stood to leave, extending his hand once more. Thank you for seeing me, David, and congratulations on everything you've built here. This company is in good hands. After he left, I sat alone in my office, looking out at the facility that had become the foundation for everything I'd accomplished. In 18 months, we'd grown from nearly bankrupt to the most profitable division in Meridian's portfolio. We'd expanded from 200 employees to 300. We'd opened a second facility in Tennessee and were considering a third in Texas. But more than the numbers, more than the success, I was proud of what we'd built culturally. This was a place where people wanted to work, where mistakes were learning opportunities rather than termination offenses, where everyone understood that their individual success was tied to collective achievement. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "How late tonight? Emma has a soccer game at 6. "Leaving at 5, I typed back. "Wouldn't miss it." That was the real victory. Not the corner office or the company car or the equity that would let us pay off the mortgage early. It was the fact that I could leave at 5 p.m. to watch my daughter's soccer game without feeling guilty, knowing that I'd built something sustainable that didn't require my constant presence to function. 2 years ago, I'd sat in my Honda Civic in the same parking lot, feeling like a failure. Tonight, I'd drive home in time for dinner, to a family that was proud of what I'd accomplished and a future that was brighter than I'd ever dared to imagine. Marcus had thought he was firing an employee. What he'd actually done was create a competitor who understood his business better than he did, who knew his company's strengths and weaknesses intimately, and who had spent 2 years learning how to be not just a better technologist, but a better leader. He thought he had fired me. What he'd really done was set me free to become the person I was meant to be. And in the end, that had made all the difference. 5 years later, the invitation arrived on thick cream-colored paper with gold embossing. Blackwell Industries cordially invites you to celebrate our 50th anniversary gala. I set it on my desk next to the latest quarterly reports, which showed revenue growth of 42% year over year. We'd come a long way from that struggling company Meridian had acquired 7 years ago. Sarah found me reading the invitation that evening as she sorted through the day's mail. "Are you going to go?" she asked, settling onto the couch beside me in our new house, the one we'd finally bought in the hills overlooking the city. "I think so. It feels like the right thing to do." The gala was held at the Grand Ballroom of the Riverside Hotel, the same venue where I'd attended Blackwell's company parties as a mid-level programmer. But tonight, I arrived as the CEO of what had become the largest manufacturing operation in the tri-state area. We'd acquired 6 companies in the past 3 years, each integration smoother than the last, as my team perfected our modernization process. The ballroom buzzed with conversation as I made my way through the crowd. Former employees, current staff, vendors, clients' faces from every chapter of Blackwell's history. Jenny from accounting, now our CFO, spotted me first. "David, I'm so glad you came. There are some people I'd like you to meet. The Henderson manufacturing team just signed on as a supplier." As Jenny led me toward a group of executives, I caught sight of a familiar figure by the bar. Derek had filled out since his nervous nephew days, carrying himself with the confidence of someone who'd found his place. He'd become one of our most effective production supervisors, eventually earning an MBA through our tuition reimbursement program. "Derek, good to see you," I said, extending my hand. "Mr. Chen, David, thank you for coming. This whole event was actually my idea. I thought it was important to acknowledge the company's full history, including the difficult periods." "That shows real wisdom," I told him. "Growth often comes through adversity." "I wanted to thank you again for giving me a second chance back then. I know I hadn't earned it." "You've more than earned it since. The safety improvements you implemented last year saved us from what could have been a serious accident." Derek beamed with pride. It was remarkable how different he looked when he felt valued and confident in his abilities. The evening's program began with a video presentation chronicling Blackwell's history. Watching the montage of old photographs and testimonials, I was struck by how the narrative had evolved. The years of struggle under Marcus's later leadership weren't glossed over. but they were presented as a necessary transition that ultimately led to the company's current success. When it came time for speeches, I was surprised to see Marcus take the stage. I hadn't known he would be there. He looked healthier than when I'd last seen him. Retirement seemed to agree with him. 50 years ago, my father started this company with a simple belief: that American manufacturing could compete with anyone in the world if we combined skilled craftsmanship with innovative thinking. Marcus began. Over the decades, we've faced challenges that tested that belief. Economic downturns, technological disruption, global competition. He paused, his eyes finding mine in the audience. 7 years ago, I made what I thought was a necessary but difficult decision that ultimately led to this company being sold. At the time, I believed I was protecting what my father had built. What I didn't understand was that sometimes the best way to honor the past is to trust the future to someone with a clearer vision. The applause was warm, but measured. Marcus had always been a complicated figure in the company's history. Tonight, I want to publicly acknowledge something I should have said years ago. David Chen, the current CEO of Blackwell Industries, was an exceptional employee who deserved better treatment than he received. His termination was my mistake, one of the most significant errors in judgment of my career. But David's response to that injustice demonstrates the kind of character that true leaders possess. He didn't seek revenge. He built something better. The applause grew stronger as Marcus gestured toward me. Under David's leadership, this company has not only survived but thrived. We've grown from 200 employees to over 800. We've expanded from 1 facility to 4. Most importantly, we've maintained the family culture that my father believed was essential while embracing the innovation necessary to compete in the modern economy. Marcus stepped down from the podium and walked directly to my table. David, would you mind if I said something to you privately? We stepped out onto the hotel's terrace, overlooking the city lights. The October air was crisp, reminding me of that day 7 years ago when I'd sat in my car trying to process my termination. I've been thinking about that conversation we had in your office a few years ago, Marcus said. You said everything happened the way it needed to. I've come to believe you were right, but not for the reasons I initially thought. What do you mean? I mean that firing you wasn't just a mistake, it was a revelation. It showed me how much I'd lost sight of what leadership actually means. For years, I'd convinced myself that making tough decisions meant making them alone, that asking for input was a sign of weakness. But watching what you've accomplished, seeing how you've brought out the best in people I had written off, he shook his head. You didn't just become a better leader than I was. You showed me what leadership could look like. Marcus, let me finish. After I sold the company, I spent 2 years doing nothing but playing golf and feeling sorry for myself. Then my daughter asked me to help her with her startup. She's developing sustainable packaging materials. Working with a team, seeing how they collaborate, how they treat mistakes as learning opportunities rather than failures. It reminded me why I fell in love with business in the first place. He pulled out his phone and showed me a photo of a modern laboratory space. We got our first major contract last month. Nothing like the scale you're operating at, but it's profitable and growing. And David, the management principles I'm using, I learned them from watching what you did here. I'm glad to hear that, Marcus, really. There's something else. The Henderson manufacturing deal that Derek was telling you about, that was my daughter's company. I recommended Blackwell as a supplier because I knew you'd treat them fairly and help them scale their operations effectively. Oh, I stared at him in surprise. You're bringing us business? Good business brings good business. Besides, I have a small equity stake in Henderson. If they succeed, I succeed. And they'll succeed faster with you as a partner than with anyone else in this industry. We stood in comfortable silence, watching the traffic move through the streets below. Two men who had once been adversaries, now something closer to colleagues, perhaps even friends. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I'd handled things differently that day? Marcus asked. I used to. But honestly, I think we're both exactly where we need to be. You found a way to rediscover your passion for building something meaningful. I found capabilities I never knew I had. The company became something neither of us could have created alone. You know what's funny? My father always said that the best business decisions feel inevitable in retrospect, even if they seemed impossible at the time. Your father was a wise man. He would have liked you, Marcus said with a smile. He always said the most dangerous person in business is someone with nothing left to lose and everything to prove. Is that what I was? That's what I made you? And it turned out to be the best thing I ever did for this company, even though I didn't mean to do it. Back inside, the evening was winding down. Employees from every era of the company mingled, sharing stories and catching up. I made my way around the room, talking with people I'd known for years and others I was meeting for the first time. Near the end of the evening, I found myself standing with Sarah by the large windows overlooking the hotel gardens. She looked beautiful in her navy dress, her hair styled in an elegant updo that showed off the pearl earrings I'd given her for our anniversary. Proud of you, she said simply, taking my hand. For what? For becoming the kind of person who could turn enemies into allies. For building something that matters. For never losing sight of what's really important. What's really important? She smiled and nodded toward the other side of the room, where Emma and Jake were talking animatedly with Derek about the robotics club he'd started for employees' children. That your kids get to see their father as someone who builds people up instead of tearing them down. That they get to learn what real leadership looks like. As we drove home that night, I reflected on the strange journey that had brought me to this point. 7 years ago, I'd thought my career was over. I'd felt like a failure, a middle-aged programmer whose best years were behind him. But getting fired hadn't been the end of my story. It had been the beginning of the most important chapter. It had forced me to discover capabilities I'd never needed before, to develop resilience I'd never been tested on, to learn that true success isn't about avoiding failure, but about how you respond when failure finds you. The next morning, I arrived at the office to find a handwritten note on my desk. It was from Tony, the security guard who'd walked me out 7 years ago. Mr. Chen, it read, I just wanted to thank you for hiring my son Michael for the summer internship program. He learned more in 3 months here than in his first 2 years of college. You probably don't remember me, but you were always kind to everyone, even on your worst day. I'm glad to see good things happen to good people. I did remember Tony, of course, and I remember that last conversation we'd had in the parking lot, both of us just doing our jobs in an impossible situation. Later that morning, Lisa called with news of another potential acquisition. A precision electronics manufacturer in Oregon that would give us entry into new markets. Are you interested? She asked. It would be our largest deal yet, but the integration challenges would be significant. Send me the details, I said. Significant challenges usually mean significant opportunities. After hanging up, I stood at my office window, looking out at the bustling activity of the production floor. Workers I'd hired, systems I'd designed, processes I'd optimized, but more than that, a culture we'd built together. A place where people felt valued, where innovation was encouraged, where mistakes were learning opportunities rather than career-ending events. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. Dad, can you help me with my science project tonight? It's about renewable energy systems. Of course, I typed back. Looking forward to it. That evening, as I helped Emma research solar panel efficiency ratings for her project, I thought about the conversation I'd had with Marcus on the terrace. He was right that everything had happened the way it needed to. But the real lesson wasn't about the inevitability of success. It was about the importance of how you choose to use the opportunities that failure creates. Getting fired had been devastating, but it had also been liberating. It had forced me to stop defining myself by someone else's evaluation of my worth and start building something based on my own vision of what was possible. 7 years later, I wasn't just a better businessman. I was a better father, a better husband, a better leader. I'd learned that true success isn't about proving your former boss wrong. It's about proving yourself right about what you're capable of becoming. Marcus had thought he was firing me. What he'd actually done was give me the greatest gift of my professional life, the chance to discover who I really was when everything familiar was stripped away. And that discovery had made all the difference, not just for me, but for everyone whose lives had been touched by what we'd built together. The story wasn't over. There would be new challenges, new opportunities, new people to mentor and develop. But sitting there with my daughter, helping her understand how innovation can create a more sustainable future, I knew that whatever came next, I was ready for it. After all, I'd already learned the most important lesson of all. Sometimes the best thing that can happen to you is the thing you never saw coming.